Jeff, why would you say that you can build muscle and burn fat at the same time when everyone with half a brain knows that you can't, with 2 question marks?
Hey team, Mike here at After40 Fitness and After40Fitness.ca. Did you like that intro? Anybody with a brain knows you can't lose fat and gain muscle simultaneously. Well, I'll tell you what drove that is a great question on a previous video by Asia. Asia's a good friend of mine. She posts all the time and asks questions, drives a lot of my videos, going to show you that good questions turn into videos just like this one. Okay, so post a question down below. I'm happy to tackle it for you and give you everything I can find, all the science behind it. That's how I like to roll. And notice the question here. Hey Mike, I see some mention of body recomposition in the forums lately. I'm pretty sure newbie lifters can add some muscle while cutting, but can anyone else? Are you for or against body recomp? Thanks. I love your shit. Thank you. I appreciate that, Asia. Hey, listen, if this is your first time on my channel or you haven't yet, please do subscribe. Just hit that like button, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the video. I appreciate it. But on that note, body recomp, do you know what it is? You know, I'm going to tell you something really quickly. It is that ability, as Asia described, to put on muscle while simultaneously losing fat. Now, if you ask anybody on the internet, ask internet gurus, go check on YouTube, check in Facebook or Instagram forums, and what you're going to find out is that the majority of people think you can't. So let me give you the basics behind body recomp, and then we'll talk about what the science says. I got to tell you something. About 10 years ago, I also thought, not possible, is exactly that ability to, while in a caloric deficit, not only cut fat, right, get leaner, but at the same time, actually grow muscle, right? Think about that. The same way. Now, here's where it becomes really relevant is if you go on a regimen where you're cutting calories or you're eating clean, you go keto or low carb or Atkins for that matter, or you start intermittent fasting and you throw in an exercise program. And all of a sudden, you come back a couple weeks later and you're like, man, I can't believe the scale hasn't budged. That's the key. Body recomposition is that with the scale staying pretty much stagnant, guess what? You look better. You look bigger. You look a little more muscular, but you look leaner. People always talk about my measurements. I can't believe that the scale is staying the same, but my measurements are improving. Holy Hannah. So by the time I'm done, you're going to agree with me that most people can experience body recomp. Most people, that it's actually a small percentage that can't. And I'll tell you who they are in a second. But as far as at a high level, what body recomp looks like, yes, you must be in a deficit. You need to be in a caloric deficit in some way, shape, or form. When I say in some way, shape, or form, it can be via food that you eat less than you need. That's a caloric deficit. Or you can eat at maintenance, as I do, eat at maintenance and create my deficit via exercise, 300 or 400 calories a day in some form of exercise, resistance training, HIIT, etc. Okay, as long as you're in a caloric deficit, you will lose fat. The inverse or the converse of that, though, that you need to be in a surplus to grow muscle from what you eat, not necessarily true. Now, I'm going to tell you something. 10 years ago, when I was also an advocate that you couldn't do both simultaneously, I had that mistaken belief, and you may as well, that, well, growing muscle is anabolic. Growing muscle is an anabolic process that requires that you be in growth mode, or the state of anabolism. But losing fat, burning fat, getting leaner, getting trim, losing weight is a catabolic process. It only happens when we're in a catabolic state. And you can't therefore be in a state of anabolism and catabolism simultaneously. That made sense to me for a decade until I saw it happen in real time, live in front of me with my boot camp crew. I watched people do it. I watched people improve their physiology every day. The scale staying roughly the same, but they look more muscular while being leaner. How is that possible? I began to realize that, yes, you can be in a catabolic state and lose fat, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you're not anabolic. Isn't that cool? What an eye-opener. Now, when I say that, let's talk about how typically most people will look at what I'm going to refer to as bulking and cutting. Have you heard those terms before? Bulking and cutting. Bulking meaning growing muscle, cutting meaning getting lean. It is very typical for a person looking to put on some muscle or to body recomp to first bulk, to add a bunch of calories, go into a caloric surplus, and then afterward cut, right? Get lean, get sure to go into a diet regimen. Now, there are those that conversely do the opposite. Not as effective in my opinion, but they'll first cut. They'll first try to get lean, thinking I'm going to lose some weight first, and then they'll follow up later and try to do a bulk. They'll add some more calories and they'll try to grow some muscle. See, in both those cases, they're missing this opportunity to go right through the center and do both simultaneously. But there really is this opportunity that we're really coming to terms with now in the last few years, based on prevailing science, that we can shortcut the system. Now, talking about who would best benefit, you have heard me already talk about beginners, about novices. There is that thing we call newbie gains, right? You've probably seen it. You've probably experienced it when you first started working out. In the first 3, 4, 6 months, we'll have results like we'll never have the rest of our lives. Second, for sure, it's going to be those who at some point were lifters or were athletic and are now what we call detrained. And it can be due to injury. It could just be, politics of life, circumstances of life. We leave the gym for a while. We lose our gains. We stop exercising. When we come back, you've heard about that muscle memory that sometimes people will say, and it's been well proven and documented, that we'll get back to where we left off much quicker than otherwise ever would think humanly possible. It's almost like a form of newbie gains revisited. Third is those that are obese. Obese, overweight, yes, but obese in particular, well, yes, 25% or more of body fat, you definitely qualify to recycle energy away from fat cells and toward muscle growth. So being catabolic at the fat cell level, at adipose fat level, and anabolic at the muscle level. Oh, very cool. Lastly, I'm going to call these slackers, for lack of a better phrase. All right. There are so many people that think, I already lift, I work out, I play basketball, I do this, that, and the other thing, not really realizing they've never truly tapped into their potential. They're nowhere near their genetic potential. It just means that even though that they're probably well experienced in some form of exercise, if they haven't actually chased their own genetic potential in the form of muscle growth, right, of hypertrophy, then they can still be called newbies in that sense. Chris Barakat is a research scientist out of the University of Florida. Some of the research I'm going to follow up with in the next few minutes is from him. And Chris is notorious for pointing out that he'll bring people in who are trained in some field, who exercise, basketball players, elite rowers, on and on. The list goes on and on. But they've just never really tapped into their potential as far as hypertrophy, as far as muscle growth goes. They've never really sat down and done a strength regimen or a resistance program for the express purpose of adding some muscle. And these people, he gave an example of a basketball player, an elite level basketball player, right? Been playing basketball, doing conditioning exercises and drills his whole life. Still walks in and in 10 weeks loses fat, gains muscle. The guy's a borderline university level basketball player, right? Still got some of this newbie gains. So when I say to you that the majority of people can take advantage of this, there aren't very many people who can't. There aren't many who have come even remotely close to tap into their genetic potential at the gym. But to summarize, this little illustration sums it up perfectly, that all we're talking about is taking the ability to grab some of our adipose fat cells, being catabolic at the fat cell level, and then redirecting some of that energy up into the processes required to build some muscle. Oh, it's so cool. So let's talk about what it takes to successfully recomp. Well, as you can imagine, the fundamentals are the fundamentals and they never change. There are two things. One is going to be working out. One is going to be resistance training. Okay, have to have a stimulus. It's going to be some form of resistance training. Second is nutrition. Nutrition, I hate to tell you, has got to be on point. Now, when it comes to the training piece, that is 100% mandatory. Don't think for a second, don't let anybody tell you that you can body recomp, grow muscle without a stimulus. Absolutely physiologically impossible. Okay, you do need some kind of an impetus, whether that's ideally a resistance training program. It could be something like calisthenics, even HIIT with dumbbells and kettlebells has a component of resistance training. That is required. Make no mistake about it. When it comes to nutrition is the interesting piece. And to do a good job talking about nutrition means we have to talk about two things. Number one, we're going to talk about calories. We're going to make sure we're talking about a deficit and or maintenance. Your call. Again, I eat at maintenance and create my deficit from exercise, but if you're going to create a deficit via intake, via food, we need to know how big of a deficit you can have and still expect to see some recomp. Wouldn't you like to know? I have science on that. But secondly, we're going to talk about protein. Okay, when it comes to nutrition, the building block of making this whole thing happen is protein. And I hate to tell you, for those of you who are in the keto space and like to think about low protein or minimizing protein, you can't. You can't and expect body recomp. And I'm going to illustrate with two studies that show that you actually need a bit more. Not high protein. Don't be thinking for a second we're talking about carnivore. But if you're right now focused on the 20 to 25% of your, if you understand macros, and 20 to 25% of your calories coming from protein, you may need to get that up a hair from 25 to 30. So let's talk really quickly about calories. Maintenance refers to the amount of calories you burn. So when we talk about maintenance calories, I'm just talking about your calories matching your daily energy expenditure, also known as your total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE. But if you are going to have a deficit, how big do you think it should be? Okay, I'm going to tell you something. It needs to be modest. It cannot be a severe deficit. If your basal metabolic rate, if your TDEE is 2,000 calories and you think you can go on sub 1,200 and still body recomp, give your head a shake. That is totally naive. In fact, let me show you a position paper right here. It was really interesting. This study did a test. In fact, I'm going to show you two, but this one here did a study showing that pretty much you can expect body recomp to disappear with a 20% deficit. Interesting, remarkable. Now, let me show you an actual study. The study was in the International Journal of Sports Nutrition, Exercise Metabolism from 2011. Notice the title, Effect of Two Different Weight Loss Rates on Body Comp, as well as strength, power-related performance. And this is in athletes. This is an elite athlete, so this is really going to be interesting. 24 athletes were randomized to either the slow or the fast group. They also did training, 4 resistance training sessions per week every other day. Right? And this is resistance training to failure. Dropping down to energy intake was reduced by 19%, right? Didn't we just learn 20%? So according to the last position paper, 20% is where you can expect body recomp to disappear. Energy intake was reduced by 19% and 30% respectively. So let's call it 20 and 30 in the slow and fast groups respectively. Here we go. Body weight, let's just start with that one. Body weight decreased in both slow and fast. In the slow group, body weight dropped by 5.6, and in the fast group by 5.5. Now let's call that a wash. If body weight dropped, right, so if you think about they're all weigh 200 pounds, they all lost 5%, call it 10 pounds. Interesting. All right, 5.6 in the slow and 5.5 in the fast. Fat mass, however, 31% in the slow group and 21%. All right. Lean body mass increased. There it is. Body recomp, my friends. Lean body mass increased in the slow group, who were at the, remember, call it 20% deficit, increased by 2.1%. Again, a 200-pound guy put on 4 pounds of muscle. Unbelievable. Whereas it was unchanged in the fast group. In fact, they say unchanged. It actually dropped a hair. I mean, minus 0.2% is negligible. Okay, so I thought that was profound that, again, just what the last position paper showed, a 20% deficit, they gained 4 pounds of muscle, right? Call it 2 kilos. Anyway, a 2% increase in lean mass, whereas the 30% deficit, we'll call it stayed the same. That's profound. Okay, so if you're thinking about your deficit, if you're looking at your deficit right now, there's two, a position paper and an actual clinical study showing that if your deficit from maintenance is greater than 20%, don't even think about putting on muscle. Don't think about recomp. At best, you're going to aim to preserve your muscle, hopefully, but I don't think you can. I don't think if your deficit is greater than 20% from basal, I don't think you can even save what you've got. Earlier, I mentioned a research scientist from the University of Florida named Chris Barakat. I'm going to recommend you actually check him out. Google Chris Barakat. He's got podcasts. He's got a YouTube channel. And he is profound in this area. He loves doing studies on body recomp. In fact, he's got his own website. It's called schoolofgains.com. Schoolofgains.com, where the gains is spelled cool with a Z. You're welcome to go check. He's got a tab for research where he shows all of his papers. In the website, if I took the time to go through it, I could show you he's got study after study. I mean, I think there's 3 different sections of studies where he shows 5 and 6 and 7 where they looked at different things. One was where they looked at body recomp without any mention of nutrition. The second was where they looked at body recomp while tracking nutrition. And the third is where they looked at body recomp looking at nutrition and supplementation to see where the biggest impact was. Please go check that out. And I want to run through a couple of the highlights the information is so good. So let me read this to you. Despite the common belief that building muscle and losing fat at the same time is only plausible in novice and obese individuals, the literature provided, and again, he lists, I think it's like 18 studies in trained individuals, trained in some form or some art, right? Really interesting. They can also experience body recomp. Obviously, individuals, and I say that's my word, obviously, individuals' training status, the exercise interventions, their baseline body comp, all of these can affect the magnitude of muscle gained and fat lost, right? Pretty obvious. Resistance training coupled with dietary strategies has been shown to augment this phenomenon. Resistance training coupled with dietary strategies, aka a bit of a deficit, high protein. In addition, there seems to be confounding non-training, non-nutrition variables such as sleep, hormones, metabolism, all that influence these adaptations. And as you would imagine, in every way, shape, or form, we're all individuals. We're all very different, and our response, my response to RECOMP will be different than yours. Yours might be better. There have been many chronic randomized controlled trials conducted in resistance trained individuals that have demonstrated body recomp. Notice in resistance trained individuals. Taken together, these reports document the process of body recomp with moderate to high dietary protein intakes. Moreover, having higher levels of body fat may affect the magnitude of body recomp because these fat stores may provide endogenous energy to support muscle mass accrual. So be clear of that. Be clear. The more you weigh, the more body fat you have, the better your recomp chances are. The leaner you are, definitely the more protein. So as I finish up talking about protein, you're going to see that trained individuals need to be at the higher end of the scale, unquestionably. Okay? So if you're overweight right now, you have the best, absolute best chance to recomp. You go into keto Atkins low carb with a very modest deficit and you throw in resistance training, you will have the best of both worlds. Don't be one of those people that says, I'm going to lose weight first and then I'm going to go check it out and see if I want to add some muscle later. Mistake. You're missing your window. You will never get the effect you have right now if you're on the heavy side. Okay, so let's finish up talking about protein. Well, my rule is 1 gram per pound, right? Again, aiming for 200 myself. Now, I will tell you this, where this philosophy of 1 gram per pound breaks down is once you get someone who is roughly beyond, let's call it 15, maybe at the high end 20% body fat. So take me, for example, at 200 pounds. What if I weighed 400? Should I eat 400 grams of protein? No, of course not. So there is a better scale referred to as lean body mass. So because I know I'm roughly 15% body fat, okay, if I'm 15% body fat and I weigh right around 200, I know I have 30 pounds of fat on my frame, meaning I know my lean body mass is actually 170 pounds. Therefore, 1 pound per lean body mass means I could get away with 170 grams, right? So the same thing can be translated. Obviously, it can be translated to 2 grams per kilo. This image does a great job of comparing two studies. Both these studies were in caloric deficits, and they put the participants in the study either on low protein or high protein. What's really remarkable is despite the size of the caloric deficit, again being 20-25%, they still, despite that, because their protein was so high, both lost fat and gained muscle. There's body recomp right there for you to see. Whereas the other group who had the same caloric deficit but less protein were not able to grow any muscle. So again, protein being the building block of everything we do, not just of bone and skeletal muscle, but of every enzyme and metabolic process in the body, is pretty much driven by amino acids. Get yours up. Again, not stupidly high, I'm not talking about that, but look at these numbers. 2.4 for you Americans, that's roughly 1.2, 1.3 grams per pound. All right, that's important. If you're looking to body recomp, never more so than when you're looking to body recomp because you're in a deficit, make sure you have adequate protein. If you have any questions on that, please put them down below. I'm happy to tackle it. I also will put links to 2 other videos down below on how much protein is too much. It may surprise you to know too much protein is more than you can reasonably eat in a day.
So you guys talk about protein? I love protein. I love protein too.
We know you love protein. Protein rocks.
Awesome.
You can eat 300 grams of my video on too much protein will show that there's a study done on 300 grams of protein. 300 grams of protein in a surplus because of the excess protein, and they still lost fat. You can actually body recomp in a surplus if the surplus is via protein calories. Unbelievable. Guys, on that note, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got some good information. I hope I did a decent job of explaining the science behind body recomp and why, if you're interested in it, do it. Up your protein, very modest deficit, and go hit the gym and lift weights. Guys, again, ladies in particular, I'm going to say this one more time. Don't think walking, don't think swimming, don't think chasing your kids around with a pillow is enough. That will not spark muscle protein synthesis. You need to lift something heavy, and you need to lift it until you can't lift it anymore. That's how you spark a little bit of muscle protein synthesis. There's no other way. It is the driver. It is the impetus. Combine that with a slight caloric deficit, or do my program of no deficit, eat at maintenance and create your deficit completely via exercise, and have a little bit more protein.
Hey, I got you guys protein shake.
Awesome. I love protein.
I know you love protein. I love protein too.
Okay, make sure you do that. I won't even talk about fasting and its impact on this process. Don't do that. All I'll say is that's counterintuitive. You actually want to eat more meals. If you're in a body or recomposition phase, don't think about fasting. You actually want to get your meals in. I think for boluses of protein, there's a good image of it. 4 boluses of protein spread throughout the day, at least 3 hours apart, is ideal. Science supports that. And again, my videos on protein timing. I have a video down below on protein timing that'll explain that in detail with studies. So again, thanks so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any comments or questions or concerns, do put that down below. Again, the best videos during the videos just like this one. Best questions during the videos just like this one. And Asia, thank you again for the question. On that note, see you next time.